The first time I heard it, I thought I'd fallen asleep with the radio on. It was 2:17 a.m., and the room was thick with that kind of silence that isn't really silence. Just the low hum of electricity in the walls, the creak of an old building settling into its bones. The radio on my desk was one of those heavy, wood-paneled relics from the 70s, the kind that still smelled faintly of dust and warm metal when you turned it on. I'd picked it up at a thrift store because I liked the weight of it, the way the dials clicked instead of slid. I don't remember touching it that night, but when my eyes opened, the dial light was glowing faintly green, and there was a voice. It wasn't music. It wasn't a news anchor or late-night talk show. It was me. And he sits up in bed, wondering if this is even real. The radiator hisses once, like it's answering. His right hand is still sore from the cut. He hasn't told anyone yet. I froze. The words were so specific, they punched straight through whatever fog was still in my head. My right hand was sore, from a cut I'd gotten 2 days ago opening a box at work. And no, I hadn't told anyone. The voice was calm, measured. It didn't sound exactly like mine, but close enough to make my skin crawl, like hearing yourself in an old home video, familiar, but not quite right. It continued, describing what I was doing in real time, how I was sitting there, eyes fixed on the radio, not breathing. It even mentioned the blue mug on my desk and the half-inch of cold coffee in it. I reached for the dial, thinking maybe it was some late-night prank show, but as soon as my fingers brushed the knob, the voice said, "He thinks it's a prank. He'll learn it isn't." I pulled my hand back like it had burned me. Then the broadcast shifted. The voice began to talk about tomorrow. Not in vague, horoscope-like riddles, but in clear, mundane detail. At 8:42 a.m., he will spill coffee on his shirt while locking the front door. He will decide against changing it, telling himself no one will notice. At 9:13, his boss will ask him if he's feeling well. He won't know why she's asking. I sat there for the next hour, listening to the voice map out the following day in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, until the transmission cut to static at exactly 3:17 a.m. I didn't sleep. Journal entry, day 2. I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. I even unplugged the radio before I left for work, thinking maybe it would break the spell. But at 8:42 a.m., standing at my front door, I dropped my travel mug, splashing coffee across my shirt exactly as predicted. By 9:13, my boss had leaned over my cubicle wall, studying me with that vague concern people reserve for strangers on a train who look a little too pale. "You feeling okay?" she asked. I nodded, but my stomach felt hollow. Day 3. I didn't want to listen, but not knowing seemed worse. This time, the voice described me sitting at the desk, turning the dial back and forth even though I knew it wouldn't matter. It described the sound of my upstairs neighbor's footsteps, the faint smell of something burning in the hallway. Then it said, "Tonight, he will hear the name again." I didn't know what that meant until the end of the broadcast, when the voice lowered, almost to a whisper, and spoke a name I haven't heard in 12 years. A name I've tried to forget. Day 4. I've been writing everything down. Every word from the broadcast, every detail that matches reality. So far, it's been perfect, down to the second. But last night, something new happened. At 2:59 a.m., mid-sentence, the voice stopped. There was a pause, and then, "Someone is listening who shouldn't be." I turned the radio off. But even in the dark, I could swear I still heard the faint hiss of static, like it wasn't done. Day 5. It's not just describing me anymore. Tonight it described someone else. A woman, walking down an empty street under a broken streetlight. The way her shoes clicked on the pavement. The way she stopped suddenly, as if she'd heard her name. And then the voice said mine. I don't know if I'm hearing the future or making it happen. But I think tomorrow, I'm going to follow the broadcast directions, just to see what's waiting at the end of them. I didn't plan on leaving my apartment at 1:47 a.m., but the voice told me to. It was calm tonight, more deliberate, almost coaxing. He will put on his shoes without turning on the light. He will check his pockets twice. He will hesitate at the door. I did. Every word landed a second before I acted, like I was just chasing after its version of me. Outside, the air had that metallic chill that makes you think of coins in your mouth. The streets were empty except for the sound of my own footsteps. He will take 12 steps, then stop. He will hear her. I counted. At 12, I stopped. At first there was nothing. Then the click of heels on the pavement. Slow, measured, coming closer from around the corner. My pulse was already ahead of the sound. When she appeared under the flickering street lamp, it was almost exactly how the broadcast had described her the night before. Dark coat, scarf pulled up high, hair catching the weak light. She didn't look at me. She passed like I wasn't there. But as she moved by, she whispered something, not in English. It sounded like a name. Not mine. Not hers. The radio didn't tell me to follow, but I did. She walked with the unhurried certainty of someone who knows where she's going and isn't afraid of what's there. The hum of the city was different here, lower, more like a pulse. At the end of the street, she turned into an alley, and for a second I lost sight of her. When I stepped in after her, the space was empty. No doors, no windows, no place to hide. Just a brick wall at the far end. My breath was visible in the cold. Hers wasn't. The voice had never lied to me before, but tonight it had left something out. I stood there, unsure how long I'd been, when my phone buzzed. No number. Just one text. Go home. I didn't sleep. The broadcast came again at 2:17. This time it didn't start with me. It started with her. She will be at the pawn shop tomorrow. The one that doesn't exist here. She will be looking at the clock in the window. The hands will not move. Then it switched back to me. He will arrive late. He will not see her leave. I wrote everything down, though my handwriting was starting to tilt, letters leaning into each other like they wanted to hide. I don't know why I'm still following its instructions. Part of me thinks if I stop, it'll stop too. But another part thinks it will just keep going without me, and that feels worse. I tried to find the pawn shop the next day. Google Maps didn't list it. Locals I asked looked at me like I was joking. But at 4:09 p.m., as the voice had said, I turned a corner in a part of town I didn't recognize, and there it was. Narrow, wedged between two taller buildings, a sign so faded I couldn't read it. In the window, a clock with ornate brass hands. Frozen at 3:06. She was there, looking at it, her reflection overlapping with mine in the glass. I don't know if she saw me. I blinked, and she was gone. Inside, the shop smelled of old wood and oil. Rows of shelves held objects I couldn't quite focus on. When I tried to look directly at them, they blurred at the edges, like the memory of a dream. Behind the counter was a man with skin the color of old paper and eyes that didn't blink enough. "You're late," he said. I didn't ask how he knew. He reached under the counter and brought out a small, black radio, not like mine. This one was sleek, metal, with no visible dials. "It's already tuned," he said. "Don't change it." I didn't remember taking it, but suddenly it was in my hands. I asked him if he'd seen her. He tilted his head. "You'll see her when you're supposed to. Not before." When I stepped outside, the street was different. The buildings were taller, narrower, their windows dark. No cars. No people. I walked fast, half expecting the alley to lead me back, but every turn was wrong. The hum under the pavement was louder now, almost like breathing. At 2:17 a.m., the new radio came to life without me touching it. The voice was the same, but distant, as though speaking from the bottom of a well. He will see her again, but not until the clock moves. I wanted to ask what clock. I wanted to ask why me. Instead I listened, because I couldn't not. It began describing places I'd never been. A train station with no name. A street where all the signs were blank. A hotel room with the curtains drawn, where someone was sitting on the bed, writing my name over and over in a notebook. When the broadcast ended, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The green dial light on my old radio was on too. I hadn't plugged it in. 2 radios. 2 voices. 2 versions of the same night. One telling me what will happen. One telling me what already did. I don't know which one to believe. I think I might have to listen to both. The old radio and the new one don't agree. I left them on opposite sides of the room. Both switched on, their static like 2 storms circling me. At 1:53 a.m., the old one spoke first. He will not go outside tonight. He will stay where he is. He will not see her. 32 seconds later, the new one cut in. He will go to the corner of 8th and Bellows. He will find something she dropped. He will not understand what it is. My pulse felt like it was trying to choose for me. I stood between them, my head turning from one voice to the other. They never overlapped. It was like they were taking turns to lure me. I don't know why I chose the new one. Maybe because the old one was the familiar danger, and this felt like a different kind. I put on my coat, checked my pockets twice. Outside, the air was warmer than it should have been for this hour. I walked quickly, counting the steps like I always do. When I reached 8th and Bellows, there was nothing. No cars, no lights in the buildings, not even the faint hum of the city. Then I saw it. A scrap of red fabric caught on the edge of a drain cover. It wasn't frayed, wasn't dirty, just folded over itself like it had been placed there. I picked it up. It wasn't fabric. It was paper. Smooth, waxy, with a faint imprint of letters that I couldn't read, like they'd been pressed in from the other side. I turned it over. The letters weren't backwards. They were missing. Whole words cut out, leaving blank spaces. I didn't know why, but it scared me more than if it had been covered in blood. I put it in my pocket. The new radio's voice returned then, louder even without the device in my hand. He will take it home. He will put it under the old radio. He will wait. I obeyed, though my hands shook when I slid the red paper under the old radio's metal frame. The old radio didn't react at first. Then its green light flickered 3 times. "You shouldn't have," it said. I swear I've never heard it sound angry before. The new radio was silent. The silence lasted for hours, until I started to think maybe I'd broken them both. At 4:01 a.m., the old radio spoke again, but it didn't use the usual detached tone. It whispered, "She's not what you think. You didn't meet her. You met something wearing her." I wanted to throw it across the room. Instead, I unplugged it. The light went out, but 5 seconds later, it turned back on. I didn't plug it in again. I don't know if I slept. I remember closing my eyes. I remember opening them to daylight. The red paper was gone. Both radios were where I'd left them. I thought about smashing them. I thought about leaving them both here and walking until I couldn't hear them anymore. But then the new one spoke, during the day, for the first time. Go back to the pawn shop. I told myself I wouldn't. I found myself on that narrow street again, staring at the faded sign. Inside, the shelves were still full of those unfocused objects. The man behind the counter looked exactly the same, except this time, when he blinked, it took longer for his eyelids to lift, like he'd forgotten how. "She's been here," he said. "Not long ago." I asked what she wanted. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached under the counter and placed something wrapped in brown paper in front of me. "For you," he said. The paper was tied with twine. I didn't open it until I was home. Inside was a notebook. Thin, black cover, edges worn like it had been carried for years. I opened it at random. My handwriting. Page after page of entries I don't remember writing. Dates from last year, last month, last week. Some describing nights that hadn't happened yet. Others describing moments I'd lived through, but with details wrong. The wrong street, the wrong weather, the wrong face in the crowd. Near the back was a page with only one sentence. "Don't listen when they both agree." I dropped the notebook like it had burned me. As it hit the floor, both radios clicked on at the same time. And for the first time, they spoke in unison. "Tomorrow, he will go to the train station." I stood there, staring at them, the identical words looping over each other, out of sync just enough to make my teeth ache. I don't know if I can ignore them. I don't know if I want to. They said it again and again until I thought the words would drill holes into my skull. "Tomorrow, he will go to the train station." I unplugged them both. The old radio's light went out instantly. The new one's light faded slowly, like it was pretending to die. I shoved them into the closet, under a pile of blankets, and closed the door. That night, I dreamed of tracks stretching into fog, each rail splitting into hundreds of thin, silver threads that wove themselves into patterns I almost recognized. In the dream, someone was walking ahead of me, but every time I tried to catch up, the distance stayed the same. I woke at 6:12 a.m., sweating, with the metallic taste of railway dust in my mouth. My first thought was, I don't have to go. My second thought was, but if I don't, I'll never know. I told myself I'd just walk past. I wouldn't even step inside. The city was different that morning, quieter, as if the buildings themselves were leaning in to listen. When I reached the station, I stopped on the opposite side of the street. The clock above the main doors wasn't moving, the hands locked at 9:17. People came and went, but their movements were strange, too smooth, like they were following a rehearsal. I crossed over. Inside, the smell hit me first, coal smoke, old wood, and something faintly sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. The announcements echoed through the high ceiling, but they were in a language I didn't recognize, each syllable drawn out until it almost became a song. I wandered to the edge of the main platform. That's when I saw her. Or rather it. The figure was wearing the same coat, she'd worn the night we met, the deep green one with the missing button, but the face was wrong. It looked like a drawing of her face, as if someone had tried to remember her features from memory but got the spacing wrong. The eyes lingered too long on mine. It smiled, and the skin at the edges of its mouth seemed to ripple. I couldn't move. My legs felt pinned to the concrete. The thing tilted its head, and without breaking eye contact, it raised its hand and pointed at a train idling on the far track. The doors were open. I don't know why I obeyed. Inside, the carriage was empty except for one other passenger sitting at the far end, turned away. I took a seat near the middle. The train started moving without a sound. No engine noise, no vibration. The windows showed the city at first, then the outskirts, then fields that didn't exist anywhere near here. The sky outside darkened unnaturally fast. I glanced back at the other passenger. Still turned away, but their reflection in the window showed something else. Someone facing me, smiling, lips moving. I couldn't hear the words. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, we were pulling into a station I'd never seen before. The sign over the platform had no letters, just a long red line that seemed to pulse. I stepped out, and the air was thick and warm, like stepping into another person's breath. There were no other people. No sound except the faint hum, the same pitch both radios made when they were about to speak. I followed it down a corridor lined with glass panels. Behind each panel was a scene, a kitchen, a park bench, a bedroom, but none of them were mine. Still, I recognized the feeling they gave me, like they were memories I'd almost had. At the end of the corridor was a door with a single brass handle. I touched it. The hum stopped. My own voice spoke from the other side. "Don't go in." I froze. My voice sounded tired, strained, like it had been speaking for hours. Then it said, "If you do, you'll forget which one you are." The corridor lights flickered. I wanted to run back to the train, but the sound of footsteps came from behind the door, slow and deliberate. The brass handle turned. I didn't open it, but I didn't run either. When the door swung inward, the thing wearing her face stood there again, but closer now, close enough that I could see the faint outline of something shifting under its skin. It held out its hand. In its palm was the red paper. The words were back this time, sharp and black. When they both agree, it's already too late. I reached for it without meaning to, and the moment my fingers brushed it, the corridor disappeared. I was standing in my apartment. The closet door was open. Both radios sat on the floor, their lights on, but neither was plugged in. They spoke in unison again, but this time, they didn't tell me where I'd go. They told me where I'd been. He went to the station. He stepped off the wrong side of the train. He doesn't know he never came back. I dropped the paper. It hit the floor without a sound, and I realized then that the ticking I'd been hearing since waking wasn't from a clock. It was coming from inside me. The ticking wasn't loud, but it was constant, an even metronome buried somewhere deep in my chest. I tried holding my breath, slowing my pulse, pressing my palm hard against my sternum, but the rhythm didn't change. I told myself it had to be my imagination, an echo from the radios, but each second landed with too much weight to be nothing. I unplugged the lamps, pulled every cord from the wall, turned off the breakers. Darkness swallowed the apartment, but the ticking stayed. I thought maybe if I could drown it out, I could forget it. So I put on headphones and blasted music until my ears throbbed, but the beat still crept through, syncing with nothing I played. It wasn't until I sat perfectly still that I realized something else. It wasn't in time with the seconds on my watch. Sometimes the gap between ticks stretched, sometimes it doubled up, like it was measuring something other than time. The radios hadn't spoken since the paper appeared, but their lights stayed on, a steady amber glow that made the shadows in the room look wrong. I decided to test them. I set my phone to record and asked out loud, "What am I counting down to?" No answer. I repeated it 5 times. Nothing. I stopped recording, and the moment I did, they both said in perfect unison, "To when you stop asking." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't risk it. I started walking around the apartment in loops, touching each doorframe, counting steps, trying to make the hours move faster. At some point, maybe 3, maybe 4 a.m., I noticed the hallway looked longer than it should. My apartment isn't big, but the stretch between the kitchen and the bedroom kept getting deeper, the shadows thicker, until the kitchen light was just a pinprick in the distance. I tried walking toward it, but my steps didn't bring it closer. The ticking got faster. I turned around, and the bedroom was right there behind me, like it had been waiting. I shut the door, locked it, pushed a chair against the knob. The sound of the ticking filled the room now, louder than my own breathing. I pulled the blanket over my head, and for a while I almost believed I'd hidden from it, until I felt the vibration of each tick travel through the mattress, like something was knocking from below. The sun came eventually, but the light didn't feel real, like it was painted on the walls. I had to get out. I shoved the radios into a duffel bag, slung it over my shoulder, and left without looking back. I didn't have a plan. I just walked until the streets started looking unfamiliar. I ended up at a public library, the kind that still smells faintly of dust and ink. I found a corner desk, dumped the radios on top, and sat down to think. That's when I noticed the librarian watching me from across the room. She was perfectly still, hands folded on the counter, eyes locked on me like she was waiting for something. I looked away, pretended to read the spines of the books on the shelf next to me, but when I looked back, she was standing at my table. "Those aren't yours," she said. Her voice was low but steady, like she'd been rehearsing the line for hours. "I found them," I said, and immediately regretted it. She shook her head. "They found you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a scrap of red paper. My stomach twisted. Without a word, she placed it on the table. The writing was different this time, smaller, cramped, like someone had written it in a hurry. "When the ticking stops, choose quickly." I asked her what it meant, but she'd already walked away. The radios clicked on by themselves. "You're running out of questions," they said. I wanted to smash them, to throw them into the nearest dumpster, but my hands wouldn't obey. Instead, I found myself carrying them deeper into the library, past rows of outdated encyclopedias, and into a section marked Archives. The air there was cooler, stiller. I set the radios down on a table covered in yellowed maps. One of them began tuning itself, the dial sliding without touch, landing on a station that wasn't music or static, but a faint recording of my own voice. I was saying things I didn't remember, describing a room I'd never seen, mentioning names I'd never heard. Then I realized it wasn't the past I was hearing. It was me, from the future, speaking in a tired, uneven voice. "You'll see her again," the recording said. "But it won't be enough to tell you which side you're on." The ticking in my chest sped up until I thought my ribs would crack. I grabbed the radios and ran. I didn't even realize where I was going until I burst through the doors of the train station. The clock above the entrance was moving again, but backwards. The announcements came faster, tumbling over one another, still in that unrecognizable language. On the platform, the same train from before waited, doors open. I told myself I wouldn't get on. I told myself I'd turn around and walk away. But then the ticking stopped. For the first time since that night, there was silence inside me. And in that silence, I understood the red paper's warning. Now I had to choose. The silence was almost worse than the ticking. It pressed against my ears like deep water, making my own thoughts sound muffled and distant. The train stood before me, doors open, lights spilling out in a pale, unnatural hue. I could see no passengers, just rows of seats upholstered in some faded fabric that seemed to shift colors if I looked too long. I told myself again that I wouldn't step inside, that I'd turn around, leave the station, go back to a world that still made sense. But my legs were already moving, the stillness inside me pulling me forward like a tide. I crossed the threshold. The moment my foot touched the floor of the carriage, the doors hissed shut, sealing me in. The train lurched forward without sound, gliding into darkness. No windows, no landmarks, just a corridor of shadow outside. I sat down, but the seat felt too warm, as if someone had just been there. Across from me, an old man in a dark coat appeared without having entered. One blink he wasn't there, the next he was. His eyes were clouded, but when he spoke, his voice was sharp. "It isn't about where you go," he said. "It's about when you get off." I opened my mouth to speak, but he lifted a hand and I stopped. "The radios were an invitation," he continued. "And you accepted the moment you listened." I asked him who sent them. He smiled faintly. "Not who. Which?" The train slowed. A door at the far end slid open, revealing a hallway that didn't belong on any train. Narrow, dimly lit, lined with doors on either side. The man gestured. "One of these leads back. One leads further in. The rest are just echoes." I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of rain, though I couldn't hear any. Each door was slightly different, some with brass knobs, some with worn handles, one with peeling red paint. The radios in my bag began to hum, their voices layering over each other in a jumble of phrases I couldn't quite catch. I stopped at a door halfway down. My hand hovered over the knob, but before I touched it, the hallway shifted. The floor sloped, the walls stretched higher, the doors seemed farther apart. I turned to look for the man, but he was gone. Only the sound of the radios remained, now speaking in sync. Choose now. Choose now. Choose now. My chest ached with the absence of the ticking, as if my body missed it. I gripped the handle and opened the door. Light burst through, blinding. When my vision cleared, I was standing in my apartment again. Everything was as it had been before the radios arrived. The kitchen light steady, the hallway the right length. But something was off. The clocks all read different times, none of them correct. I set the duffel bag on the counter, unzipped it. Inside, instead of the two radios, there was only one. Its casing was cracked, its speaker dented, but when I turned it over, there was a strip of red paper taped to the back. It read, "You left one behind." My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered without thinking. On the other end was my own voice, but older, rougher. "You'll hear it again," it said. "When you do, don't ask who's speaking." The line went dead. I left the radio on the counter and backed away, my hands shaking. The apartment felt smaller, the walls too close. I opened the window to let in air, but instead of the street outside, I saw the train platform. Same empty tracks, same flickering lights. I shut the window. When I turned back, the radio was gone. Days passed, at least, I think they did. Time felt fractured. Sometimes the sun would set twice before midnight. Sometimes I'd wake up and the date on my phone would be one I'd already lived. And then, late one night, the ticking returned. Louder than ever. It came not just from my chest, but from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the air itself. I couldn't tell if it was counting down or up. I found myself standing by the window again. The platform was there, but now the train waited, doors open. I knew then what the choice had been. It was never about which door in the hallway. It was about staying off the train entirely. And I'd already failed. The ticking grew unbearable. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was already seated inside, the door shutting behind me. Across from me sat the old man. But now his eyes were clear. "There's no going back," he said. "Only choosing again." Outside the window. Yes, there were windows now. The landscape rolled past, but it was wrong. Streets I didn't know, buildings with shapes that made my head ache to look at, skies the color of faded photographs. The train kept moving. I don't know where it's taking me. I only know that somewhere, in another version of me, the radios are still on a kitchen counter, and the ticking hasn't started yet. And maybe, if they choose differently, they never will. But that won't help me. The ticking is mine now.